get money. Won't do it.
Okay. Welcome everybody to November 26, 2024 Upper Thames River Conservation Authority Board meeting. As a reminder, Emily Chandler is serving as our meeting host. So if those of you online have connection problems or issues with technology, please contact Emily through the chat feature. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the UTRCA YouTube channel. Please refrain from side conversations while the meeting is running, as it could get picked up by the microphones. A reminder, when the squares are glowing red, the microphones are muted, but as you can see, they're green, so they are on. If you are a board member attending online, please have your camera on during the meeting, especially during a vote. Otherwise, I may not be able to see you when you want to talk. I do see Scotty and Harj are online. I know that Skylar will also be joining. Do we have any other board members online?
Joining.
Oh, okay, excellent. And I believe we're missing Jim here this morning. So welcome to everybody else. We have a new board member. Exciting. Welcome, Jean. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Jean Cools. I'm from Middlesex Center. I represent Ward 1, which is Ilderton, Dunfield, and Burr, if you've heard of those places before. And I was just appointed last week was my very first day. So thank you so much for having me here.
Why don't we just go around the table, we'll introduce ourselves. I know we've had a chance to do that a little bit before the meeting, but start with you.
Hugh McDermott, I'm the deputy mayor of Perth East. I've been on this board so long that I can remember when the dinosaurs were running around. But anyway, it's a pleasure to meet you.
I'm Sandy Levin. I'm the citizen appointment from the city of London.
Mark Schottenberg. Mark Schottenberg from Woodstock, second term on this board, second term on Woodstock City Council.
Paul Mitchell, councillor for Zora Township. Like Mark, I'm second term on council, second term on the board.
Hi, Dean Kotowski, deputy mayor for West Perth. First term on the UTRCA board, currently the vice chair, and sitting on the hearings committee and finance and audit committee, and we're pleased to have you here. Thank you.
Yep, Brian Petrie, Mayor Ingersoll, and the chair. I've been on the board since 2016, and yeah, like I said, you've joined the best conservation authority board available. So congratulations.
I'm Tracy Anna, general manager. We had an opportunity to meet yesterday and give Jean a little bit of an orientation, so she's not completely jumping in out of into the things.
Charles Vigilante, we met yesterday. I'm the administrative assistant. We're doing the minutes.
I'm Tom Heeman from Ward 1 Councillor Thames Center, and I represent Thames Center and Lucan Badolf.
George Way, councillor for Township of Southwest Oxford. I also represent Norwich. I was on the board from 2010 to 2018, was off 4 years, and I came back.
Hi, I'm Anna Hopkins, third term city councillor for the city of London and third term on the CA board.
Well, let's go online. Scotty, do you want to put yourself?
Welcome, Jean. My name is Scotty Zaire. I'm on Township of East Zora Tavistock, and this is my first term on the board.
Harj?
Welcome, Jean. My name is Harj Niger. I'm the deputy mayor for City of Stratford. This is my first term on the UTRCA. It's been great.
Skylar?
Hey there, my name's Skylar Frank. I'm the Ward 11 City Councillor, and this is my first term on council and on Upper Thames.
And last but not least, Peter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter Cuddy. I'm councillor for Ward 3, which is where Upper Thames resides. And this is my first term on council and my first term as a board member. Thank you.
So thank you very much, everyone. I know it's going to be overwhelming. We've all had that chance to be our first meeting, but like I said, we have a great board and lots of people that have a lot of experience. So don't be afraid to reach out, have any questions, and you'll get a lot of history. That's for sure. All right, we will begin with the territorial acknowledgement. We begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Apac peoples, who have a long-standing relationship to the land, water, and region of Southwestern Ontario. Local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nations of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation of Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nation and all the original people of Turtle Island. With that, we will now move on to modification of the agenda. If I could, I'd like to have a motion to move item 8.4 that deals with the delegation that we're going to have and move that up to follow the delegation. If anybody's interested with that, that way we can. Moved by Paul, seconded by Mark. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. And that brings us to our presentation of delegations. And I'd like to call on our Mike Wallace for first delegation. Come up to lectern and welcome, sir.
Or not? Do I need it for them? No?
Oh, no.
No, I don't need it for them.
No, it would only be the people in the back.
Okay. Can you hear me back there? Okay. Not that you care really. First of all, Mr. Chair, thank you for having me here today. Mike Wallace, I'm with LDI, the London Development Institute. I'm a little out of breath because I just ran in the door. There's an accident on Veterans Parkway. And it's not a good one. And but it doesn't look like anybody's hurt, but it slowed me down for about 10, 15 minutes. But anyways, so congratulations for everybody getting here on time. So first of all, thank you for moving the 1.8 up. I do have some comments from others since I'm here, but last meeting, you passed the administrative review policies. Thank you to Sandy and for asking for any input from the industry and kind of delaying it until this happened. So instead of just and staff did send me an email and I circulated it to our group. Just for your information, I got a few. There was no negative in the sense that anything that I expressed for a change. The only comment that I got back, and I instead of putting it in an email, I thought I would do it here, is that on the 30 days that are provided, that need to be a response. There is an out for staff that if something comes up that it can be 30 days. We just want to encourage you that if this process is undertaken, that the 30 days it has to be very much an exception to the 30 days. The difficulties we have with the I want to say difficulties, but the issues that I tend to hear from our industry, the development industry, is that it's not about the work that's done here, it's about the length of time it takes. So any extra time, they showed some concern, but nothing to ask for any change. So we're okay with what was proposed here. We do look forward. I know you'll be talking about other things on the agenda. We do look forward to the strategic planning process, and you've mentioned this. You've got partners in the description of the thing. I'm making the assumption that your clients or the industry that you deal with from the planning perspective are partners in that, and that it's not explicitly saying that we are. So I wasn't sure about municipalities and other partners. So I'm just putting on the record that we'd be happy to treat it as partners. Sort of the final thing I want to bring to your attention, which is great, but two things. One, I appreciate being moved up on the agenda. A future consideration for next year is that in all of your agendas, you have your confidential piece kind of in the middle before reports. If you could move that, I think that's item 7 to, not today, but going forward, your income reports are number 7, your reports for information are number 8. the public aren't involved in camera items. So if you could switch 7 and 8 around going forward so that all the public stuff, potentially public stuff, is before you go into camera, unless, of course, the in-camera item reflects to a public document that's further in the agenda, that I understand, but the reports are mostly for well, they're called for information. So just something to consider. And the final thing, since I'm here, I've taken advantage of it. On your section 28 reports, I want to start with the congratulations on the 28 reports. I just want to show you, it's not that long ago, a couple of years ago, this is the cover letter you would receive from staff. It wouldn't tell you anything, and then you'd have your chart behind it. Based on some discussions with some of your board members and with staff, now you get a more fulsome report on how the 28s are going. So I want to congratulate staff on that. The other thing going forward that maybe we can be part of the strategic plan or part of the planning documentation that's being reviewed in terms of your manuals getting reviewed, and we're part of that organization, is that I hear often from my members and others that, and as the report states, either the 45 permits in progress split by year once the permit number is assigned. We believe, so a number of development applications spend a lot of time up here before they get a permit number assigned to them. I think as a board, you should know what's going on in terms of other planning applications that may or may not need a 28, but still are at the table at the Conservation Authority at the staff level. And I'm looking forward to the discussion over the next year on the planning manual and on this to make sure that you and we understand the time it takes for things to get either approved or disapproved here. We need it one way or the other. It's the timing is mostly our issue, is how long things take. We've had a application came to my attention earlier this year. I asked them, well, we need to get your 28 permit number. Well, we haven't got it yet. I said, well, how long have you been at it? The application's been floating around back and forth for like 6 years. I said, well, how can that be? And so it got explained to me, and it's not all something wrong. It's not just the conservation there, it's also the app. But we need to do a better job of getting that stuff through. So those are my delegations. On the administrative review policy, the only other recommendation I would make is that when you're making changes or doing these kind of things, we're happy to be consulted in advance before it comes to this table. And then we can be here in support of it at the time when it's passed. So we do appreciate the opportunity to comment, and I'll take any questions you have, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, one, I want to thank you for coming. We always want to hear back on our policies, and certainly I think it should go without saying that you're a partner at the table, and it's a big part of our business to be able to development and regulation on that side. So certainly those conversations help, and certainly whether it's yourself or any member that we want to be transparent. We want to have people watch our meetings and participate. So I thank you for the feedback, and I think the board will certainly appreciate that and take that into consideration as well. Yeah, I think we've tried. I think you've seen some good things from the Conservation Authority as well, trying to get that communication and understanding and our policies that we've adopted a lot this year that are going to go into force to try to make sure that everybody does know what is what and timing and that sort of issues and when those things start. And so again, any of the feedback on those policies and certainly through the strategic plan would be most welcome. That's how we do our best job. We put it out there, and then you try to get the feedback from it to see where people can improve and make sure it makes sense to everybody and everybody has a clear understanding. It's one of those things, you write something, you understand it, but does somebody else reading it get the same message? So I really appreciate you being here today just to be able to share those messages, and I think it's a really good thing that we have those communications. I will open up to questions from the board. Mark, please.
Yeah, from the chair through the delegation. I guess my best question is geographically, you just represent what would be deemed the city of London and its boundary, not outside of London like that's for anyone else in Middlesex County.
So a little bit about my organization very quickly. LDI is a industry-based, membership-based organization. All the members are in London. All my work is done. I'm on 11 committees at the City of London. I spend all my time at the city or here. But none of our I do nothing outside of London. Some of our members are developing outside of London, but I'm a one-man person show. And so I'm headed to London at this point.
Any questions? Make sure to look online. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
That item 8.4. And there we go. The administrative review policy under section 8 of regulation 4124. Is there anything you'd like to speak to that, Tracy?
No, I wasn't sure if Jenna or Joe had anything.
Excellent. Is there any questions from the board on the room?
I'll move the recommendation that we receive the report for information because we did have this before us. Good to hear that the LDI is comfortable with the content. The only question is about the 30 days. 30 for you to staff, the 30 days is just, that's our target anyway. If I recall, or maybe it's even less than that in terms of completing. And we get an annual report that shows compliance with the CO targets of over 90%. So we're not perfect, but I don't think anybody's ever going to be perfect because not every application is the same. So tell me how that 30 days is connected to our objectives in what we're doing with this new policy. I think my understanding is the target. If you can't do it within 30 days, what does it mean? You just drop it? Or, I mean, could you help explain to the board why there's a need to say not everything's going to happen in 30 days, essentially?
I'm going to ask Joe if you'd like to answer that. You could come up to the front here a little bit. The back corner of the room.
Yeah, not that we wanted to go over that period, but.
Thank you. And then through the chair, I think the 30-day requirement comes from the regulation. So when we do administrative reviews, the regulation states that a decision has to be made within 30 days. I do recognize the comments made by the delegation. It will always work in an effort to get it out as soon as possible, but it has to be made within 30 days. The regulation does recognize that if for some reason there are circumstances where we may not. So for instance, if the delegated approval officers were on vacation or ill, or something like that, could delay the timelines for getting that out. But our policies do recognize in that case, we'll consult with the applicant and we'll get written agreement that they understand and accept that delay. Otherwise, we may be forced to call a hearing or bring a board executive together to make that decision so that we can make the time within the legislative requirements. So everything that comes out of our regulations now have timelines for decisions. We do need to know that we need to work within that, try and get decisions done as fast as we can, but we're held to a legislative timeline. If that helps answer your question.
I think it does. My recollection of the policy was that there's at least two people who can give approval. So if somebody is on vacation, there's a fallback. So it's recognizing what's in the regulation is reflected in the policy. It's not there because we have an out that we've written into it. It's reflecting what's in the regulation. So I think it's pretty clear from what Joe has said that there are going to be exceptional circumstances where there may be a hearing, which is not the goal of staff either. So I recognize the concern. I hope the answer that staff have given addresses LDI's concern, and perhaps Mr. Wallace can communicate that back to his members. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, there is a motion on the, put on the floor. Is there a seconder for the motion to receive the report as recommended? Anna, thank you very much. Discussion? I'll just say that I think this goes to what we heard from the delegation as well. We know as a board that we don't want to hold up development. We don't want to hold up giving an answer on items. And so we've, staff have done a lot of work by bringing forward policies to be able to make sure that the applicants and their consultants know what kind of information we need to be able to deem something complete. And that's a very good thing that conversation's happening. And then this policy is going to say whether that's happened to meet the regulation, but also have that communication with those doing business with us to be able to say, this is the time frame we're going to do it in, and this is the process that's going to happen. So there's clarity on that, and hopefully that will go a long way to be able to make things work smoother on both sides. You know, it's through the regulations department and for the people using that service. And so I think it's a good thing. And again, just another big step forward in policy that's been happening this year. And this is another piece to that to make sure that we keep moving forward in a changing time. With that, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And that will take us to 4.2. That is another presentation on regulated area mapping. Everybody see that fine? Or would you like the lights down a little bit? Please go ahead.
So for the benefit of our new member, my name is Jenna Lane. I'm the manager of our Environmental Planning and Regulations Department. And as many of our members know, our Water and Information Management team has been in the process of updating our floodplain modeling for some time now. And I'm happy to report that we have completed that modeling work for the entirety of the Thames River through our watershed. It's been peer reviewed, and we've recently, as of October, just initiated some public consultation on a portion of the Thames River. So the current study area that's out for public consultation is the Thames River through the City of London. And simultaneously, we've undertaken a pretty comprehensive review and update of our erosion hazard mapping. So both of those pieces have been combined into a regulated area mapping update, which is currently out for public consultation. So today's presentation is about that process. I'm going to provide a brief kind of regulatory context for what we use our mapping for. And then Erin Dolmage is here. She's our communications and marketing specialist that's leading the communications piece for our regulated area mapping updates. So Erin's going to give the bulk of the presentation. She'll talk about kind of the flood hazard updates, provide a high-level summary of the work that's been undertaken, as well as the erosion hazard update. And then she'll finish by talking about the consultation process that we're going through. So next slide. So our regulatory responsibilities are set out in 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act. And basically what that section says is that unless there's a Conservation Authority permit, any activities that would change or interfere with the watercourse or a wetland, as well as any development activities that are happening in areas within the authority's area of jurisdiction would be prohibited. So next slide, Emily. In terms of where our areas of jurisdiction lie, we regulate watercourses, floodplains, steep and unstable slopes, valleys, wetlands, as well as the lands that are directly adjacent to those features. Slide. So really, our regulatory responsibilities are all about protecting people and property from natural hazards. So we have three kind of main objectives. We want to make sure that when planning for new development, construction and planning is done so that we're not putting life and property at risk, we're not creating any new hazards, and then we're not exacerbating any existing hazards. So next slide. So our mapping is pretty important for our planning and regulation staff internally. So we rely on it pretty heavily as an organization, but it's also used as a screening tool for our member municipalities. And it's a general tool for the public to be able to look up properties and screen whether they may be regulated by the Conservation Authority. And our mapping requirements are now set out in our regulation. So we have a Section 28 regulation, it's Ontario Regulation 4124. It came into effect in this year, and it basically says that conservation authorities are required to have their areas of jurisdiction available on public maps at their office, as well as available online. Next slide. So this is currently what our online mapping tool looks like for the public. So we take all of those features that we regulate, they're all identified individually and then overlaid on top of each other to come up with the larger regulated area, which is sort of shown in that red hatching. Next slide. So the regulation also recognizes that natural hazards are dynamic in nature, that they're subject to change. And so while we want our maps to be as accurate as possible, and hence the reason why we're undertaking this pretty comprehensive review and update of our maps, there can always be conflict between what the maps show and what actually exists on the landscape. So the regulation recognizes that in that second section that's highlighted, where it talks about conflicts, the text description of a feature prevails over the mapping. So Erin's going to take it from here.
So due to a number of factors like age, technology, a lot of new data and physical changes to the watershed, we've undertaken this process. So it greatly increases the accuracy of hazard identification and gives us the most current information to assess risk. Next slide, Emily. So for our staff to start on this process, they consulted technical guidelines and standards. So these are the guidelines that the Ministry of Natural Resources and Conservation Ontario have put together. They also consulted engineering standards for this process. Next slide. So the most critical piece of information that we needed to start updating the maps was digital elevation data. So through a project with the Ontario Ministry of Ag and Food, we were able to obtain that information. It gave us a level of detail that we never had before and was too expensive to acquire on our own. Slide. So to give you an example of the level of detail that this gave us, this is the number of properties on the Thames River near Delaware. Next slide. So looking at these properties with the old information that we had based on Ontario base maps, we had a 5-meter contour interval. And with the new information, next, we now have 50-centimeter contour intervals, which gives us a great level of detail. Next slide. So when looking at the two different hazards, erosion and flooding, with flooding, we are still following the flood event standard of the 1937 Thames River flood. So that's a 1 in 250-year flood, which has a 0.4% chance of occurring in any given year. And that was confirmed again in the new update of the regulation in April. This standard has been in place since 1989 when the Upper Thames and our member municipalities did ask the province to reduce it from Hurricane Hazel, and that was approved. Next slide. So to update the flood hazard, we had to go through the extensive process of looking at the watershed. So we started with the hydrology, so how the water runs off the land. Staff take a different approach depending on what part of the watershed we are in. So if we have stream flow information, water level information, we do a statistical analysis on that. If we do not have that, we create a computer model to assess the hydrology. Slide. Sorry, I should back up. For the Thames River, we had the stream gauge information, so we use that for this current study area. The flood flow information that's generated through that first process is then put into the hydraulic model. So hydraulics is looking at how the water moves through the water course. So we need a large amount of information to go into the computer model, UTRCA, to generate the flood elevation levels. So we take the digital elevation information, we get survey information. So the two images on the right of the screen, the top image is showing the data that we received through the digital elevation. You'll see on the bottom, there's a red curve. So when the airplane is flying over and taking that information, it can't go beneath the water surface. So we're missing that piece of information. So our staff have done a huge task of surveying the riverbanks, the riverbeds, bridges and culverts to add that information into the model because it does affect the flood elevations. The bottom graph or bottom image is showing a bridge structure. So how that information gets put back into the model. And we verify the model with our high watermark data. So after a flood event happens in the watershed, staff will go out and collect high watermark information. And that goes back into verifying. Next slide. So just to give you an idea of the current study area and the amount of field information that was collected, those are all the survey points throughout the City of London. It greatly increases the accuracy of our model. Next slide. So once we have the flood elevations from the HECRAS model, we match that with topographic information to create the updated flood hazard. And as Jenna said, it then goes out for peer review by third-party qualified professionals. When we look at the erosion hazard, again, we're using the digital elevation information. The previous elevation data we had inconsistent coverage, scales were different, and accuracies were different. So having this new digital information was really important for this process. Next slide. Staff worked through creating a mapping methodology for how they were going to update the erosion hazard. So they consulted the technical guidelines, the regulations, and came up with the following approach. So finding valley sections that were greater than 3 meters high, they digitized the top of the valley slope, toe of the valley slope. They applied the toe erosion allowance, which is in the guidelines, and calculated the projected stable slope. So the next few slides are going to show you images of this. So here is the physical top of slope. A lot of this was done manually by staff for the greatest amount of accuracy, and it took over a year for this to be completed. Next slide. There's the toe of the slope. And then the next slide will show you all the information coming together. So the yellow is the toe erosion allowance that is applied. The orange is the projected stable slope, and then the access allowance that we apply as well. So that creates the erosion hazard regulated area. Next slide. So as Jenna said, we take all of this information, all these map layers, and lay them over top of each other to produce the overall regulated area. Next slide. This slide shows you a cross section of what the previous slide showed. So on our mapping, that red is the overall extent of all the regulated areas. And then these are the layers that are underneath with their allowances and setbacks that are in the regulations. Next slide. So this is an example of the new updated information for the City of London. A lot more detail than in previous mapping. Slide. So just to give you an idea, there was over 20 staff that were involved in this project from across 4 different units. So water management, information management, planning regulations, and communications staff. Next slide. So this is the current study area through the City of London. As Jenna mentioned, we are taking consultation out for the whole Thames River. This is the first section to be released. So next slide. So this is a rundown of the consultation process that we have undertaken. There were 6,500 letters sent out to landowners within the regulated area. We created that mailing list with the city. We launched a project page on our social engagement platform, Engage Thames River. I realized I did not put the newspaper ad. We did put an ad in the London Free Press 30 days before public meeting. Social media posts and a slide that went out to the City of London that was going to be shared on public screens in their venues. We met with LDI, and we also did an email notification to consultants, law offices, and real estate associations that we work with. Slide. So we had our public meeting, our in-person public meeting on last Thursday night. We had 140 people in attendance. We had some education materials such as the sand table and floodplain model that our ed staff were working on, and a greeting area that we had pull-up displays at. We had 5 or 6 consultation tables going with planning staff. So when people came through the door, they were given a number and called up to a consultation table with our staff to look at the mapping of their own property. Slide. Our Engage Thames River, I went back through to see the engagement through that website. We've had over 1,300 visitors to the site since the project started. 112 downloads of our fact sheet that we have on there. 58% of the visitors went directly to that site. So from our letter that went out, that information was there. So they've gone directly from the letter to that site. And we've had a number of questions. I think we're up to 25 or 26 questions now on there. We've also had a number of people email and call in directly. We're getting close to 100 landowners that have contacted us directly. Well, next slide. Our next steps are to review the comments that are coming through the consultation process. Once that is completed, the final map will be posted online, and then we will move on to the South Thames River, which is from Piddock Dam to the City of London limits. That'll be the next consultation phase. After that, the North Thames River, we're waiting on the 2D modeling of St. Mary's to be peer reviewed. And then finally, the London limits west to Delaware will be the final piece for the Thames River. I think that should be it.
Well, excellent. Exciting stuff. I know it's a lot of work, and I will certainly open up to board questions or comments. Oh, please.
Yes, excellent presentation. Of the 20 staff that were noted contributed to this, how many people are working full-time on this project?
Good question.
You want to jump? I'll start with that, Paul, after the chair. Certainly staff have other commitments as well. So very few are dealing with the mapping updates on a full-time basis. Again, all these different components. We have the modeling staff that are working on flood modeling and watershed-wide. Our GIS staff are spending some of their time doing refinements, but not 100%. I would say all of Aaron's time though is dealing with the communications plan of that, and then a number of reviewers through planning departments, the regulation staff. And they know those areas of the watershed. They've worked in those areas, so being able to provide that review to say, does this look accurate from what we're seeing in site visits in the field? Jen, any other additions?
I would just add that it's a big and complex project with lots of staff working on it, and it's been hard to bring it all together, because as we said, there's 4 different units, lots of staff, other people, like everyone has other priorities and projects that they're working on. So Erin's really the only full-time staff member that's dedicated to this project, and it's been really great to have her on the project, because she's been kind of steering the ship and pulling us all together to really push it, and get the consultation moving. So it's kudos to Erin, she's been doing a great job.
Andy.
So, yeah, again, thanks for the presentation and thanks for this work. I mean, we're changing stuff that was done in the 80s. Yeah, we've taken advantage of a lot of technology to be able to provide better information. So the consultation that we're doing, is it primarily informational to folks, or is it anticipated that there'll be changes based on feedback? Through the chair.
Through the chair to you, Sandy, I would say that that's to be determined. So we know that the City of London has asked for our model and are actively reviewing the model, the floodplain modeling, as has LDI. So we have both of those organizations reviewing, and we'll see what their feedback is on the actual floodplain modeling. And whether that provides any change. And then I think we have to wait and see what the nature of the public comments are as well. I don't think we're opposed to making changes, depending on what the nature and level of detail of the comments that we receive. But comments don't close until the end of, or December 26th, right? Sorry, we forgot to note that.
Yeah.
Presentation. Public commenting closes December 26th. So we'll assess at that point what the feedback we receive is and whether changes are required as a result of that.
So all this work is based on data that's available from the province that I'm assuming is known and been peer reviewed and is accepted. So the data, and looking at the work that was done, I mean, it looked like people were like within 100 meters of each other doing data collection along both sides of the Thames through the City of London. And I assume that's happening in other parts of the river. A model is a computer program. It's been peer reviewed, and I assume the peer review has looked at, and maybe staff can help me. The peer review has looked at the quality of the inputs, or looked at the model, or is this a standard model that everybody uses, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm trying to understand what work that the City of London is doing in reviewing this, what work LDI is doing, what work individuals might do that would change the outputs of the model. So it's really everything's on the inputs. So what changes, what differences are there? And I'm just trying to understand all this, because at a certain point in time, there will be a change to the regulated areas that will have impacts. So I understand why a lot of work is being done to get to that point, but at some point you got to stop. So help me to understand some of these variables, and are we talking about centimeters? Are we talking about millimeter? Help me, help.
Who would like to start?
I was gonna suggest Chris to talk a little bit about the peer review process, because that's kind of where Sandy's honing in on some of the questions. We've gone through this extensive three person peer review in order to, again, nail down some of those same things that are questions that you're asking, Sandy. Chris, good.
Mr. Chair, if I may, try and unpack that a little bit. I'll start by saying it's difficult, actually, no, it's impossible to determine what we might receive through comments from these people that are taking a look at it. So I appreciate Jenna's comments about exactly that, right? We'll have to wait to see what the comments are, consider those and see whether they warrant any adjustments in the modeling, therefore in the hazard lines that contribute to the regulatory mapping. The peer review, I think, has been very extensive. We've gone through not just having one person input it, but 3 people. One with the Conservation Authority's background, having some experience with how the technology is applied to the regulatory process. One with more of an academic background, and one a consultant. Again, quite familiar with applying these tools to the task at hand, basically. You mentioned standard models. Yes, you're correct. We're using standard computer models used by the industry. The detail is in how they're applied. And peer review would include input, output, assumptions, all that sort of thing through that process. And the comment about the information that went into the model was provincially available information, and to a large part that's correct. The additional survey points would be outside of that, but they add considerable value to that modeling process because they help us understand the what's under the water, which during a flood is part of the flow, but under the normal water level is part of the flow, but not all of it when you consider the channel and the floodplains that are conveying water. So that's important, but the structures are also critical to it. Because the water crossings, they provide or basically cause constrictions or restrictions, and have an impact on how much water can be conveyed. So pretty important additions to that. I've talked around a lot of it. I think my initial comment is really the answer to it. It's not possible to determine what comments might be received and what others' thoughts are on the process and assumptions, detail that went into it.
Yeah, so at a certain point, Mr. Chair, we stopped. And the regulation also says it's the map, but also the text applies. So there's no perfect. So at what point do we stop and implement? That'll be next year. Is that the plan?
Well, I think, I think staff have presented a process to get us to the most accurate data to keep people safe and property safe and not deter land use where it's not warranted. And I think that's where you stop, where you say, we've taken everything we can into consideration. There's going to be variables on, it's a model. It's not ever going to be perfect because the last one was made and it wasn't perfect. There's always going to be opportunities for change because nature, you can't predict nature, right? You're trying to do your best job. But I think in my view about it is that when you get to a point where as many variables, you've had the chance for input, you've considered that input, and then you say this is the best way we can go forward, and it gives some clarity to people on what's going on, much better than what we've had in the past. And so it's a step forward, and I don't think staff are ever going to stop working on this sort of data collection, especially with climate change and stuff like that. But I just have to give extreme kudos to staff. Like, I think that the beginning of that presentation, I would love to see that turned into a small YouTube video on what you guys do to try to go through this process. I think that's a very good educational item there. And the graphics are awesome, and it shows, it can be confusing sometimes. It's just like, oh, the maps are in that building. And, how's that map made and what does it mean? Because it's just a piece of paper. We have a regulation, it's just words. Now you're seeing it as a map. But what you saw in that video and on those things is extreme level, and we're going to use the term science-based expertise, that's for you, Tracy, of knowledge that comes from that and the inputs that go into it, like you're talking about. That creates a lot of knowledge of competence and integrity behind that science and the map that's out there, because it's going, like, I think this is where you're coming from, Sandy, is like what we saw there was there's a lot of work that's gone into this. It's gonna hard to be able to have something come out of it where it's like, well, that's not accurate. So really, I think, at the end of the day, I think staff is taking the best approach possible to just say, hey, we're willing to listen. I think that's a positive thing, because it's always gonna change, but at the end of the day, it's about education. And hopefully that education will get to the point where people do feel comfortable and say, yeah, you know what you've done here is good, and that's what we're gonna go by. Tom?
Yeah, I got a three-part question. The first one is a follow-up to Sandy's question, like, is this kind of similar to the Drainage Act where it's basically like technical revisions and you'd actually need different data points to change the calculations in terms of feedback, right? Like we're largely looking at physiographical information, not necessarily other qualitative information to change the parameters. Yeah.
Yes, correct.
So they need like hire another engineer in order to, and like ground truth it if they want to change it.
Right.
And it would have to be validated by our in-house expertise and third party.
We also know, as I said, that we've got certain groups that have asked to review the technical information. So they've requested our model, and we've provided it to them. So
But that would be a technical review as
that
well.
would be a technical review. Yeah.
Okay, so the second question is, once this is set, like, is it still, like, in order to get section 28 permits and things like that, you still have to do like environmental impact studies or floodplain analysis, and that would further ground truth any local features?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the nature of the development, right? We're always encouraging people to stay outside of natural hazards, and that avoids the need for technical, additional technical work. But it's where people want to within the regulated area, so within a floodplain or within an erosion hazard, or within a wetland, that's when we require additional technical studies that need to be undertaken in order to confirm the extent of the hazard on a site-specific basis and determine the development level.
Then the third question is, you talked about rollout in urban areas. I was just wondering, like, what activities would happen in rural areas, or is it mainly based on the LiDAR?
You mean in terms of where we go next with updates? Yeah, I think it's largely going to be based on development pressures. So we've got a large watershed. There's lots of water courses. We've completed everything for the Thames River, but there's a lot of other water courses that need to be modeled and mapped. And so we're just trying to prioritize which areas we start in. And the intent is to model everything and update our mapping everywhere, watershed wide. But just in terms of trying to prioritize where we go next, I think we're going to be looking at where we're seeing the most development pressure.
So
that tends to be in more urban areas, right?
to pick back up on Sandy's point, and is this still gonna roll out next year then for rural areas, even without the ground truthing, or is it?
So next year is largely going to be focused on rolling out the rest of the Thames River updates. So I think Aaron went through the list. I don't know if you want to bring that back up, Emily, in terms of the rollout for the rest of the river. So that will take up a large part of 2025. And then we'll be trying to focus on, are there other water courses and areas within the watershed where we're seeing a lot of development pressure that should be prioritized next for our modeling work.
So it's not, the map's not gonna be rolled out. It's a rolling rollout.
A rolling rollout, yes.
Would it not make sense to take a precautionary approach and still have that rural information available that involves ground truthing, just so that we could have some tool available to the public versus no tool?
I think there's a tool there available now. It's the old mapping that's available. The current information for London will be updated to what we have now. Staff are always using the best available data to be able to give the most accurate assessments of things. So as things come in, they incorporate it, but there's still, to be clear, there's mapping available for all the watershed. It's just at what level of update is available. Chris.
Yeah, so if I may, through the chair, the comment that, or what's been discussed around here is kind of I'm going to refer to them as study areas. What what is being reported or what has been presented here today is the consultation. That's kind of the end or towards the end of that process. But there's work going on across the watershed on collecting the information that's needed, developing the models, getting them ready to take through peer review so that they can go out to consultation. So you're seeing sort of the end of the process for the City of London, Thames-based stuff, and then the priorities for the next parts that would be rolled out through the next year. But there's been active work, collecting data, providing the models, and getting ready for that process to be able to get it to this stage across the watershed, be able to prioritize those areas to the extent possible, to be able to figure out what the next areas are to go through that peer review process, so they will be ready for consultation as well. We can't wait until everything's ready and do the entire watershed. We would be at this forever. It seems like we have been already. That just wouldn't allow for it. So we have to chunk this up into small study areas, and that's what we've been doing. And that's been really challenging because of those pressures and because of the need to have information available when people are looking for it. It has been challenging, and it's you're chasing yourself around the watershed, trying to build this to get it to the stage where it's ready for in a package that we can take through that process. I hope that kind of helps describe what's going on, has been going on, to get us to the point where we can go take it through peer review and then out to consultation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, congratulations on a very good report. I found it very informative, and as always, the chair is a half a step ahead of me on this thinking. But as you were presenting, I'm thinking, wow, we need to go to all of our member municipalities and present that. So as I like the chair's idea of packaging a video that goes through that same presentation and hits all the main points, because it's important for the board members to know, but also our member municipalities, and more importantly, our partners such as LDI and similar partners outside of the City of London, and the general public as well, because going back to what the chair said about public education and public knowledge, like letting them know this is the work that we're up to, this is what we're doing, this is where your money is being spent, and it's for everyone's benefit. I think that's super important to get that message out. And as Chris pointed out, there's a ton of background work being done in the field. So if you need more money in your budget for work boots and rubber boots to cover all that ground, by all means, let us know. But I think of this as a hazards. It's a budgeting process for hazards. Similar to what we do financial budgeting, it's a hazards budget. We're gathering information and input material. We analyze it. We come to conclusions, and then from those conclusions, we make our decisions on hazards. No different than we go through a monetary exercise for a budgeting. So it's the same steps, same thought process, and we're trying to come to the best possible conclusion, as the chair said, to minimize hazard and minimize risk. So I think your presentation just hits the nail square on the head, and I would like to do that, as the chair suggests, packaged up so that we can bring that message forward. Thank you.
Further questions, comments?
If I could.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So on the Engage Thames River website, we do have a short 2-minute video that's a full notes version of that presentation. And it is on our YouTube channel. The hope is to have a video series that we can share on our social media platforms and just keep educating as we continue to roll out this information. As well, tonight we're having our virtual open house. So we will be recording that presentation that Jenna and I are giving, and it'll be on the Engage Thames River site as well.
I just have one question. What does, so we say the flood of 37, we say the event of Hurricane Hayes. What does that mean technically for on your side of things? Obviously, you just don't have like a magic wand, you go flood of 37. It's so much rain in a given time. Is it, you know, what does that mean if we need to explain that to somebody?
I was gonna say, I can try, but Chris is.
Yeah, I'll try and capture the highlights without getting too much into the detail, defer to those that are actually working on it on a day-to-day basis for the additional detail if you need that. But my understanding of the 1937 flood is what we apply is a 250-year flood, and that's based on the 37 flood was a 250-year return period flood that happened at the Ealing gauge. And then by doing the statistical analysis, determining that it was a 250-year, that allows that standard to be applied over the watershed. The 37 flood was not felt across the watershed at the same level of risk. So that's a bit of a problem. It was more centered on the South Branch. 47 was apparently felt more on the North Branch. You can see, you know, we got some challenges in the standard that they went with, and through an extensive review period process with Ministry of Natural Resources to be able to accept that lower flood standard than Hazel. That's what they landed on.
So again, that goes back to Sandy's comments about inputs. As inputs change, that happens. And so the other answer, I think what we got out of that is complicated. Every part of this is complicated. And people need to understand that it's not just someone sitting there drawing a line going, I think it should be about here. Again, I think that's very well spelled out, and I think that's a good story for us to tell, because you want science. It's happening, and there's a lot of layers to it, and that's why it takes so long. Is because there's a lot that goes into it, understanding the inputs and the outputs that come out of that.
Yeah, I guess just to more clearly frame my concern is that I understand we're using the best current data internally, but if the public doesn't have the best current data, then we don't necessarily have the best deterrent strategy for people when they're trying to conceive of plans. And I think like it is difficult to get the intensity of the same intensity of data in rural areas as it is in urban areas. And if there wouldn't be some benefit to having that awareness in the general population of at least, if not the final destination of where these lines are, knowing these lines are constantly under revision, but at least getting a closer approximation, because I've seen it where development applications have come in and people are just confused about like what is and what isn't the boundary. So that's where I'm coming from.
No, absolutely. And I agree with you, but I think that that's always the question. The balance that we face is the input. We have budget pressures and we have data pressures. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so if I can just add to that, one thing I didn't talk about in the presentation was one thing that our new regulation requires of us is to update our maps annually. So every year we're required to undertake an annual review of our maps and update them accordingly. So we've been starting to have some internal conversations about what that annual update is going to look like and what information and inputs go into it. So I know that you're concerned about the rural areas and it feels like they're being forgotten. We do have a lot of, as Chris said, a lot of really good information and data that currently informing our decisions in rural areas. And so we're starting to have that conversation around the table to sort of say, what can we do in terms of updating our mapping to recognize the information that we have in other parts of our watershed that maybe we haven't completed the full modeling process yet, but we still have really good information that's helping inform decisions already. And how can that inform mapping updates so that we're being more open with the public about it?
Mark.
Did this report ever get to the point where you basically really are insisting somebody do a certain project? In other words, in Woodstock, you say that the Thames River in the Woodstock area, the final new mapping isn't completed yet. But Highway 2 or Dundas Street in the west end of Woodstock was flooded so bad just last year that the exit underneath the railway bridge was closed for 3 days because of flooding. So you could, in theory, get to a point where you sort of say, Doesn't matter if you're pointing fingers at the railway or you're pointing fingers at the city of Woodstock, where you say that must be fixed because this will be an ongoing issue every time there's a major rainstorm. Could it get to that point based on your mapping?
You mean in terms of having them undertake their own flood?
Yeah, then you sort of say it's in your best interest.
Yeah, and I
You can't force anybody to do anything. The UTRCA would have the mapping.
regularly, we make recommendations to where we don't have modeling complete. Or we may have partial modeling completed that hasn't been peer reviewed yet, then we're providing that model to developers to sort of say, here's our model. If you want to hire an engineer and look at it yourself, then we'll take that back and review it. And then our engineering staff are reviewing the modeling.
If I may, just, and Jenna handled the part about the development process quite. I'd like to focus on the suggestion that about a bridge that floods and closes out quite regularly. There is no process for us to force mitigation. Municipalities or parties. Mapping that we're consulting on is for regulatory processes. But the municipality may wish to undertake works that mitigate flood damages. Replace, raise, move the critical infrastructure so that it's more resilient to flooding. Dundas Street, that's historic, that's always been it's a low point. It gets flooded quite regularly. Maybe not quite as long as it was in the past time that you were referring to it, but it's, there are many of those throughout the watershed. And this modeling isn't about mitigation measures. Maybe sometime in the future, we can start looking at some of those things. Looking at where there are opportunities for improvement. So when there is a capital investment going on, that's sort of, hey, did you know that if you actually modified it in some way, that it would alleviate some of the flooding problems in the area? There are examples where municipalities and others have undertaken that type of.
Well, so I appreciate the great conversation. This is a topic that's obviously important to a lot of us, a lot of people across the watershed. That's what we're here for, is to keep people safe, and it's a fundamental piece of the work that the authority does. So thank you very much. Certainly be looking at the YouTube video, and I'm sure if it's a message to board members, if you want to make sure you get that out to your fellow counselors and anybody else, that's highlight that. That's a good information sharing one there. And I thank you so much for all the work. I know it's been a long time coming, and there's lots more to do. But, well done. Thank you. Is there a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation? Anna and Scotty, we'll go online. Thank you. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we will now move on to administrative business. 5.1, our minutes from the October 22nd meeting. There is a note that the title of item 7.1 was incorrect in the minutes. It should be pending acquisition and for disposition of land and inventory review. So is there a mover and seconder to approve the amended motion? Amends. Hugh and George. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Hugh. There are no business arising from the minutes or correspondence. So we'll go down to 6.1 for items of consideration and the 2025 fees policy. So we have not heard back from the ministry yet about what they intend to do about the fee freeze. So right now, as you can see, there is no raising in the fees. And so we'll certainly see what happens there. Gene, just for your notes, the last 3 years, as it says in the board report there, that the fees have been frozen. And certainly that's a concern from a financial standpoint. So we did some advocacy work. Local municipalities, all 97% of the watershed came on board, and we sent that off to the minister to hopefully give him feedback on what this area would like to see happen. Turn it over to Tracy for comment.
And that's very much specific to planning and regulations fees for planning and permit reviews. But with our fees policy, we have an annual review of our policy document. We've highlighted a couple of clarification words. And now that we have an administrative review for the section 2028 permitting process, we thought we should clarify the administrative review was for fees within the fees policies and not to be confusing the two. But with that, each unit manager went through our fee schedules that are attached to the policy and looked for any areas where amendments might be necessary. I would say that many of our fees took a comprehensive review just over a couple of years ago. So really what we're seeing this time is some minor reviews and changes, typically to recognize some cost of living adjustments, or in some cases with education, really just to better reflect the new programs that we're offering today so that there's clarity in the fees that we're charging. Certainly, if you have any questions related to any of the fee schedules, our managers are here to respond.
I'll move the recommendation and ask a quick question or comment anyway from the first page. It was last year, December 13th, that we heard from the minister about our planning and regulation fees. Maybe at our December meeting, we'll know more of the success or lack thereof of the effort to lift the freeze.
Other questions? Is there a seconder for the motion put forward by Sandy? Tyler? Thank you. Discussion? None. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. And the next one is 6.2, 2024 meeting edition and 2025 board and committee meeting schedule. So as you can see, the schedule for the 2025 remains unchanged. Day of the month, starting at 9:30 a.m. As they say, same place, same time. And I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Just to highlight, typically we don't normally schedule a December meeting. However, in the past, we have had to add one on a few occasions. This year is one of those years where we felt that given the number of items needed before the end of the year, and then scheduling our board meetings at December meeting is required. So again, we have lots of deadlines for submission prior to December 31st. So getting an extra meeting, not the fourth Tuesday, but the third Tuesday is proposed.
Excellent. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I really appreciate the report. I do have a question. I know at one time we would always have a timeline as to when we can expect the end of the meeting to be completed. I felt that gave us a general idea where we should be in the agenda. I was wondering if why that was removed.
Probably because the chair likes to talk.
I like it when the chair talks.
It's a fair point, and that's something that I know we try to aim for 11 or 11:30 to try to get finished there. So, and I'm totally doing that. Totally doing that.
I was just curious to know, it helped me when I was looking at the agenda, where we are in the agenda and where we're expected to end, that's all.
Duly noted. Thank you. Any other questions of the report? Well, thanks staff for not the fourth Tuesday, because that is Christmas Eve. Because I like everybody here, that's not a, we want to be, so. With that, is there a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Tom and George? Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. And we'll go to 6.3 strategic plan update. And so I'll say that I was able to be at both of them, as many members were, and I thank all those who participated. It was certainly an interesting experience. Not something that you think you're going to do every day, but there was a lot of good input, and it was certainly it was a fun experience. So a lot of interesting inputs and stuff to the vision, mission, and values. You say our consultants are very they think outside the box to try to get the best things coming out of them, it's, the best input. And so I think that was a success, and I'm excited to see what comes forward to it. So, Tracy.
Yes, thank you, Brian, through the chair. I got provided the report, and then since writing the report, we've had writing team session. So I'm able to present kind of some of the high level comments that were received, and then the proposed vision mission statement. So with that, Emily's just pulling up on the presentation now. The next slide, please. A little bit of an overview. I'm going to highlight the timeline, our engagement sessions that we've participated in, those vision, mission, and values, and then the next steps moving forward. Just kind of waiting till screen shared as well for everyone online. So with that, the next slide is the timeline. So really, it's been phase one in this period, October to December, where we've had board and employee engagement sessions. Our focus at this time has been more that internal vision, mission, and values identification, and wanting to incorporate those same vision, mission, and values into our watershed strategy. Phase two will focus in on that interest holder and partner engagement. There'll be consultation and preparation of what all that consultation undertaken, and looping back with staff and board members, then the preparation of the discovery report number 2. That will help inform our priorities and goals moving forward, and we'll be seeking board direction on that. In March, that's when the management team will be taking and finalizing kind of our operational planning of those key strategies and actions with the timelines and resources project leads identified. Again, that discussion, all with staff, it's where really that engagement to know where we're going to be focusing our work moving forward. And then in April, the board of directors to proceed. That's our timeline today. So next slide. A little bit about the staff engagement sessions. Didn't realize how many people loved puzzles. It was a great activity to get everyone thinking a little bit outside the box and having that teamwork and collaboration. Platinum Leadership led 6 staff sessions, and it really provided staff both the opportunity to input on the strategic plan, and then Tara was able to also engage staff again to really bring all unit perspectives together to receive input on the watershed strategy as well. So in total, 110 staff participated in this room, and again, led by Platinum Leadership through that process. Next slide. So really, when we're talking about the context for our vision, mission, and values, that's really the governance elements of a strategic plan. And the vision is our desired future state, and the difference we'll make. With mission, it's what our organization is, our role to bring that vision to life. And those values and guiding principles are kind of the timeless and non-negotiable actions that guide our decisions. Next slide. We also had the board of directors engagement sessions. This was a recreation of that on the floor from what happened in the boardroom. Again, a number of those words that kept coming out time and time again. And the thing that I'd like to highlight is the number of times the same thoughts that the boards had were very consistent with what we were hearing from staff as well. So there was the November 8th engagement session, again, having an opportunity to provide inputs. And then October 21st, the workshop where it reviewed all of the inputs and the raw data that was provided. But Platinum Leadership did a great job of kind of pulling that all together and seeing those commonalities throughout all input sessions, and really being able for the group to work away at vision, mission, and values. Some preliminary thoughts were also gathered on the guiding principles too. Then it was directed to the writing team. So thanks so much to Teresa, who's online today, and Eleanor for helping out. Again, we were engaged with Platinum Leadership to take all those ideas that we heard and try to compilate that together. So, values. Through this process, the next slide, Emily, please. We used the 5-finger model and we continue to do that in our writing session. And again, that was our decision-making model for level of consensus. You know, that 1 was like, no, disagree. 2, sort of. 3, that neutral party. Again, trusting the group's decision and wisdom moving forward. 4, that agreement and finding things to be acceptable, and to ultimately to 5, we're absolutely agree with that. So was happy to see the numbers of 4s and 5s around the room when we were discussing where we were leaving things off to move into our vision, mission, and values. Next slide, Emily. So with vision, again, the question that was being asked by everyone is, if the UTRCA were to have the impact it desires, what would the watershed look like? Came up with communities engaged in a healthy, resilient environment. What is healthy, resilient environment came up over and over and over again, and the recognition that we want to make sure it's not just us doing the work, but it's our communities that are engaged in doing that as well. Next slide, Emily. With mission, question was, what must the UTRCA do to make its vision a reality? And we came up with to conserve the watershed through science, education, policy, action, and experiences in nature. We really felt that that was what we do as a watershed as a whole, and really hit on all the actions of our units, everyone through education, science, and science-based. That was something that came up over and over and over again. And again, that we're not just doing the work, we're trying to educate everyone to do that work, either through our policy. Then we're also those action and doers. We're doing those work on the ground and want to ensure that everyone has those opportunities for experiences in nature. With values, what words or behaviors and attitudes describe when we do our best work? Leadership. There was a number of words that came under leadership, but really wanting to recognize that we model and encourage sustainable, innovative stewardship of leadership. We just don't tell people to do it. We want to lead by example and model those behaviors. Collaboration, we partner to protect and promote a healthy environment and resilient communities. Again, collaboration and partnerships was constantly a key theme. I often joke, we'll partner with anyone we make eye contact with, because we really want to do everything we can to protect and promote our own watershed, but also instill that we have resilient communities. And then acting with integrity. We act with transparency and accountability and root our work in science. And science-based theme coming out. We want to be transparent and accountable ourselves, but our member municipalities and all of our partners. And again, what we do in our work day to day is all based in that science. So pulling it all together, I know when looking at everyone's input, it was like, where does that fit? Does it fit better in a vision statement? Does it fit better in a mission statement? Or is it in a value? Not having that duplication of the same words, because I think we could have used sustainability in every one of our items that you see there. But showing them all together, recognizing that really when we're looking at that vision, it's that broader, higher level plan, driving down to the mission, to the work we do, and then values and how we do that work. Really thought that this process, again, really recognized everyone's input. And we really took some time to give a lot of thought into how we actually operate. Again, we didn't want to just have messages that don't really mean anything for us. We wanted to make sure that they were coming from within how we work. So with that, yeah, is there anything missing? So next slide. Or is that covering things? Happy to hear any discussion, but all right, I've got a few more slides on next steps after.
Just gonna say that if we're gonna use a 5-finger model, if you're gonna use one finger, just right. Work. Yeah, so I'll leave it open to the board for questions and comments on the presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I participated in both workshops, and I really think the staff made a good selection of from Platinum to do this work. So you're presenting the draft vision, mission, values to us today. And unfortunately, because of schedules, not all members of the board were able to be there for all of the sessions or some of the sessions even. And now Jean has joined us as well. This is still draft. It's going to go out to partners and communities and so forth, and it'll come back again. I guess what I'm trying to do is there's always situations where people who make decisions who have been unable to participate and are only seeing this for the first time are being asked for a consensus. And that can lead to disagreements later. So I want to avoid those by asking, how are we going to, are we taking some baby steps before we're jumping into it? I'll let staff respond.
Through the chair, really, we wanted to pinpoint the vision, mission, and values to incorporate into the watershed strategy, which we'll be seeing next month. And are we on the right track? There's some opportunities for some changes before approving that watershed strategy, but the next steps. So I haven't gone on to the next few slides because I wanted to pause here, are really about how there's other opportunities for engagement as we prioritize and set our goals moving forward. So this is your opportunity for additional input on vision, mission, and values today, but happy to hear if there's anything else that the members would like to see incorporated as we discuss the watershed strategy as well.
Mr. Chair, the other piece of this is how will we, or when will we know that staff are in agreement, 3 or 4 or 5 on the consensus scale in support of this? Because ultimately we're temporary to a certain extent. It's the employees who have to live this every day. So where's that piece of this puzzle?
Well, I can touch on that. It's like, we as governance are supposed to, this is what we're responsible for, is the vision, mission, and statement. Those marching orders and the mission, as they say. So really, that's where we get to go on, and then that's going to guide the work that staff do on the whole strategy going forward. Now, what I'm thinking is, we just heard this information today. The phase 2 is not supposed to start till January. I think it may be, as you stated, Sandy, some time to sit on there and reflect on that and have those conversations, and maybe bring this back in December. As far as, is that going to cause a problem if we just take what we've heard today? We can disseminate that to the board because that wasn't part of the actual package. People can have time to look at it, especially those who, if they weren't as part of the process. This is coming as just new information. So just to give everybody a chance, this is an important thing. I think there was definitely consensus around the table on those items, but how we got there was not a consent. Like there was a lot of those pieces of papers changed on the floor multiple times, different headers and stuff like that. And it was a great discussion how that happened. So I'd like to encourage some of that to happen as we go forward. And I don't know how the board feels about that, just coming back next month and we having a quick discussion and then giving final direction at the December meeting.
Yeah, through the chair, or to the chair. Yeah, I mean, given we're finally seeing, even the people who attended the workshops are now seeing what the writing team put together for the first time. So I personally, if it doesn't hamstring the process, I'm certainly in support of giving the board an opportunity to digest it and come back, since we do have a meeting in December, to be able to say, yeah, we can support this.
And obviously, if there's something that people want to talk about today, that's certainly what we're here for that. But how's everybody feeling?
I wasn't able to participate, but I love it. I think it's a good fit.
Good to hear. Dean.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I myself was able to only attend one of the 2 sessions. I made the first one, but not the second one, so I missed those discussion. I'm gonna add I've done sort of a quick digestion. And I'm gonna add in our mission statement, protection, so to conserve and protect the watershed through science, education, policy, action, experiences in nature. I'm just gonna put that out there and we can go back to it in December, but that's my initial reaction right now, is to add the words "and protect" into the mission statement. But as Sandy suggests, let's come back.
I think that's exactly why, is because we'll have time to be able to really look into it and make sure that we are comfortable with it. Because hopefully this will stay around for a while. That's the goal. And so you don't want to change those all the time. So it is important that we get these right this time, and everybody feels comfortable putting up 5 fingers or 4 fingers or whatever finger they want, right? Paul?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to participate in both of them. Sandy did, and I would agree that until basically only half the board was able to fully participate. And as Chair said, that's our role to come up with these 3 parts of this strategic plan. Putting it back on the agenda for December so that the rest of the board can have some input. It's a good idea.
There is a recommendation here. We might just tweak a.
Actually, if I can.
Oh, certainly you can. Try to keep on schedule.
So with the next slide, the next steps, again, recognizing that we still have to refine our guiding principles and undertake the external, sorry, I'll wait for Emily. Screen, so defining those guiding principles. There'll be external consultations to inform our priorities and goals. And then that's really when the management team and staff develop those operational plans. And exactly as Brian stated, the vision, mission, and values are really the governance piece of the strategic plan. When we get into those operational plans and looking at that's when more staff engagement is definitely going to be a part of that. And then finalization of the plan. Certainly as well with the information that was compiled, used by the writing team. The consultant provided their report this morning, so I'll be circulating that out to board members. So it has all the scribble notes on the flip charts that were used. And again, some of the stars highlighting those keywords that were used to inform the writing team's process for identifying the vision, mission, and values that we've shared. Next slide. Again, having that recommendation that was included in the report and taking that strategic plan input sessions, be directed to update the vision, mission, and refinement of guiding principles and core values and mission to be to the watershed management strategy. So wanting to take at least what we have now to incorporate into the watershed strategy, and then can update it if and as required after the December meeting.
Thank you very much. Apologize for cutting off early. So we have a recommendation that was put forward. Does someone feel comfortable moving that, or would they like to do a different recommendation to incorporate what we talked about moving it for? So I think, well, let's start with, we can certainly receive the import. The results of the strategic plan input sessions be received. I think that's a no-brainer. And that staff be directed to bring back the draft guiding principle, core values, and mission statements to the December meeting for board approval. Mark and Anna, discussion. Sandy.
How does that affect the incorporation into the watershed management strategy? Is that okay with what staff are working on?
Through the chair, I think with, it sounds like, yeah, there might be some refinement. We've gathered all this information so far. I can't imagine it changing dramatically. There might be some minor edits. But we can include that in the strategy, and then that could be a finalization of the watershed strategy would be to update to align with the approved board of directors vision, mission, and value statements.
Isn't that Doesn't that have to be done by the end of this calendar year?
Yes.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of wondering if we approve it on the 17th. So I just want to make sure, I think I share the opinion that we're not likely to make huge changes to it. So hopefully it doesn't interfere with meeting that day. That's all.
I would say that the board should come back prepared.
Yeah.
To make a final decision. What I didn't hear today was anybody absolutely disagreeing with what we saw there today. I think we're close. And if there is someone here that disagrees with us, we can have that discussion today to make sure that we're basically in alignment, but let's have a final look at this. Prepared. I would go with staff. Is staff taking it as they're going to, what I guess why I'm not comfortable with the original recommendation is I don't like when it says put this in here as the final thing, because it takes the thing that it can't change.
Yeah.
And it can. This is, at the end of the day, the board has to make this decision. Staff done a great job of trying to come up with those, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the board that needs to feel 100% comfortable with this. So I think I've heard that we do have time. Most likely it may not change at all. Like, but if we come prepared on the 17th, make that to get a final document done, that's what everybody should be prepared for. That kind of answer your question.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there anybody online that has a question? Just can't see. No. Okay. So all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Very much. And we will go to item 6.4, which is the ice management and operation plan. And I want to thank staff again for another deliverable that's due by the end of the year. And there's been a lot of these, so thank you very much. And I know we're going to see some more in December as well. And certainly one of those ones that need to happen. And thank you again for bringing that forward.
I'll move them.
I'm just going to go to Tracy first for some opening comments, but I will.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, again, these are all requirements to comply with the mandatory programs and services regulations. But I wanted to point out that when we're talking about our operations plans and management plans, there are a few that actually do not require that public consultation. And we go back to our regulation specifies the requirements under each one of these deliverables. And there's no public consultation required. And really, they're not even required to be posted on our website. Yeah, those other plans are required to do that, but we really feel that having these operations plans more publicly available and accessible, there'd be greater understanding of how we manage our flood and erosion control structures. So with that, pass over to Chris if he has anything to add or, nope, he's good.
No, stretching.
Oh, sorry. Any questions or comments?
I found this one of the most interesting reports ever. Very informative. It's just my area of interest, but a suggestion that in the past we've had board road trips, and if there's a road trip next year, if we could incorporate one or two of these facilities and see them firsthand how they operate.
Is there a mover and a seconder for receiving the information? Sorry, as the recommendation. Sorry, Tom and Dean, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, we will now be going into closed session. So I will need a second to do so, and that is that the board of directors. Just wanted to go into close. And George, discussion, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried, and we'll just wait. If we have everybody here, we'll just get through this, so. And the board did have a discussion in closed and received information, but there was nothing coming out of that. We will now move on to items 8, reports for information, 8.1, administrative and enforcement, section 28. Is there a mover and a seconder for the review? George, any questions? Jenna is available. Sandy?
Looks like a lot of new major projects over the last month in London. Am I reading that right? Now 10?
Oh, in permits in progress, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
The other question I had, and it was raised by Mr. Wallace earlier, is the question of when does an application actually get a permit number, I guess? Because there's an application, there's information collected, and at some point an application becomes complete. So where in that process is a number issued? And how is it reflected in the report?
So, the chair, I think that what Mr. Wallace was referring to is a lot of Planning Act applications, where they're concerned about timelines on Planning Act applications, and those aren't captured in this monthly report, right? So we're not getting to the permit stage until the planning process is complete. So yeah, typically staff are collecting that they'll receive a permit application. And as soon as they receive an application, that's when a permit number gets assigned.
With obviously section 28 approvals come after Planning Act approvals. And so, okay, and there are, sometimes we get applications and there's no requirement for a 28 approval, right? And you note that in your report, and it seems to be a lot of them. But they do take up they do take up time.
Yeah, we're just trying to reflect the fact that there's lots of regulated properties where people have some kind of development activity happening on their property, but they're happening outside of the regulated area, which is when we're issuing a clearance. So it's still staff time to review the project, and sometimes some negotiating to make sure that it's happening outside of the regulated area. But if a permit's not required, we're issuing a clearance, and we're trying to reflect that in terms of overall workload for regulation staff in the report.
Yeah, and in a case like that, it would never get a permit number because it's not a permit requirement. Okay. And kind of related to this, one of the things we've finally got movement on was issuing an RFP for streamlining. So can staff update us on where that piece stands?
Sure. Yeah, through the chair. Our RFP was posted a couple of weeks ago. It's closing December 6th, I believe. So we've had a number of consultants reach out already with lots of questions. So I expect we'll receive some bids. So it was posted to our own website. So where we list projects that are for bids and tenders. We have a web page for that, but then we also posted on the bids and tenders website. So yeah, we'll see how many applications we receive or proposals we receive when it closes, but I'm expecting, I've been getting quite a few questions, so I expect we'll see after that. And we're hoping to be able to review applications and then award the tender before the end of the year.
Oh, okay, so it's obviously it'll start in 2025, and is, not having seen the RFP, is the intention to have recommendations, well, at least before the end of 2025.
I believe the recommendation that we passed could be his first quarter of 2025.
Right, that's what we put in the RFP.
Right. Okay, good, thank you.
So just going back to your comment there, is that's exactly why we have the new policy for the 4124 is a permit number can't be given unless it's a complete application. And so staff will have that timeline to be able to deem it a complete application going forward. No, I'm wrong on this one.
So, yeah, I think we were trying to capture permits in progress. So that doesn't necessarily reflect a complete application yet. And I think by the time we get a complete application, staff are also like relatively close to, we've been working with the applicant to get all the information we need to complete our review. And then we're within a pretty close range of actually issuing the permit. So we are trying to capture those applications where we've had some contact with an applicant, a section 28 permit is going to be required. At what stage do we determine that that permit is in progress? And when we had discussion internally about it, it was when the permit tag was assigned. So
Yeah.
it's a tag, which is the permit number. So staff are receiving enough information that they're assigning a permit tag to the application, but the application is not necessarily complete at that point.
So we're not necessarily getting a report that tracks an application, number of applications. Or are we?
That's what that's what we're trying to capture.
All right.
But we also, that's why you see some applications that are still a permit in progress from 2023, because that application has never been deemed complete. But we've had enough dialogue with the applicant to assign a permit tag to it. So assuming that that information is going to come forward and we'll receive a complete application ultimately. Seems like the best way to capture permits in progress, but it's not perfect.
If we have the checklist and things and pre-consults, then there should be clear expectations and that in progress time should be shorter from the applicant.
If that would be the goal. I know there's a lot of things outside of everybody's control of items that may need to take longer to get that information. So it's and business decisions as well. I'm sure. I guess from our end, as long as we can get through and make sure that the timelines that we need once that information is there, and that we have a reporting structure to know that that staff can articulate where they are in the process, whether it's a it's at this stage, and this stage, then we can communicate that effectively and know where we're meeting our requirements, which is the important part of our duties. Is there any other questions on the section 28? With that, I'll call for did I call for a move in a second? Did. Skylar, I'll take you because I've seen your hand before. And Tom, discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And I remember I did before, but we'll take a second. And then we'll go down to reports of information, product status update, which, as you can see, this document is getting longer and bluer though, which means stuff is getting done and we'll have more coming forward December and after today, which will turn into blue. So if there's any questions on that one.
Maybe not a question, just maybe a comment. I noticed on the way in today, driving in, that the Children's Safety Village is still on the sign as you drive in. I think there might be some misnomers. I think that it actually exists when it doesn't.
Very good. Is that I've started implementing this through different committees and stuff I'm on as well. I find it a very effective tool just to be able to go back and say, you know, a lot of things happen. We give direction as a board and staff have deliverables and stuff like that. So it's easy to go back and say and remember those items. So I guess if that's a tidbit for people's councils and stuff like that and other organizations, it's a useful tool for sure. And it's certainly awesome to be able to see the check marks, or the blue in this case, go on and know that things were accomplished. With that, I'll ask for a mover in a second to receive that. Mark and Skylar. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We've dealt, 8.3, 2025 board election information. And reminders, always get out there and discuss with your fellow board members of any roles that you'd like to try to fulfill for the January election. Certainly we've stepped up and served this year. Certainly I know it's extra work, but it's rewarding. So there's lots of roles coming up. We actually had an election last year, which is fun. So there's some good interest. So make sure you get out there and talk to people. And Tracy, no.
Yeah, no, just again, that reminder in advance. And if there are any positions that you're contemplating, make sure you copy Michelle and I, so we're aware as well. Again, helps us with preparations in January.
Any questions on that report or? Seeing none, is the mover and a second to receive that? Paul and Tom, discussion? Oh, sorry, you,
No,
all in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, we've done with 8.4, so we have 8.5, which is tentative and current, which is always exciting. Since we have a new member, I always remind everybody to sign their counselors up whether they want it or not, because it's great information to be able to see what the authority is doing. There's lots of great good stories on there to be proud of. Is there any questions of the tentative current this month? None, mover and a second to receive that. Harj and Scotty. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. There are no updates from the Finance or an Audit Committee or the Hearing Committee. The Hearing Committee will be meeting after this meeting. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. Chair's comments. I know we're running a little bit late, so I'll keep them brief. Again, I'd like to welcome Gene to our group here. It is a dynamic group. There's lots of good work going on. It's an effective board. We have a great staff, and I'm sure it's going to be a rewarding board to be on. I've certainly found it that way over the years. So again, I want to wish everybody a good time. I know we'll be meeting for the holiday seasons again, and so I thank everybody for giving up their time during that busy time to be able to get the work that we have to do for the board. And at the end of the day, we're going to have some big accomplishments come out of this year on the board. And really the last 4 years, I think we can look back and say, wow, there was a lot that happened. And certainly I want to thank staff the most for that, because they've had to do the work. We just get to put up our hands and say thank you. So thank you from the board for all that can happen. And it's an exciting time. The strategic plan one is an exciting one. It's going to give us lots of input going forward. And I know that people participated. I didn't see one. I came in the one day, I was a little bit meh, and then within 5 minutes, it turns it right around. So they're great at doing what they do, and it's a really positive experience. So please have time to look over that and come prepared next month for some discussion on that, so we can get that going. I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Members comment.
No members' comments. Any members' comments?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just, I guess, mirroring your comments, a big thanks to staff on all the different activities, the hazards mapping, the strategic planning, the public consultation. We appreciate all the legwork that you have to do and dealing with the public and informing and educating, working with our partners to keep them up to speed. There's no loss growing on our organization, and definitely no cobwebs gathering in the corners. We have an active agenda, and I appreciate all the work that our staff are doing to keep us up to date and in compliance with our year-end deadlines. So thank you.
Seeing none. Tracy?
My only comment, in the interest of time as well, is to remind everyone that I'm going out to present our draft budget to our member municipalities. So I've been to St. Mary's already. I have Stratford scheduled on Thursday. I'll be there. But certainly if that's something that you'd like me to attend your council to talk about our 2025 draft budget, happy to do so. The information went out to the clerks and CAOs to circulate. But again, just a reminder, if you'd like me to attend the councils too.
With that, I'll call for adjournment. Moved by Tom, second by Harj. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your rainy day. It's a tradition here. Yeah. When we meet, it rains. No thunder.